Today, we continue our Under the Microscope series, this time focusing on Matty Coronato.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jessica Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. Today, we continue to do some deep dives into the Flames rostered players, and I thought that after Mackenzie Weegar, we could take a look at Matt Coronato, who signed a very hefty extension this summer, and we'll talk all about that and more. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames for more content like this, as well as your in-season coverage and any breaking news. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Let's jump right into this, because to me, Matt Coronato is another one of those players that has had to work a lot harder. Not because he's necessarily undersized or anything like that, but because, we know that, granted, things have changed a lot over the years, but as an American, we know that the hockey programs aren't nearly the same as the Canadian ones or some of the ones overseas. Granted, Matty grew up on Long Island, New York, which, is a stone's throw away from some of the best development programs, and he found himself there. Like I said, he grew up on Long Island in Green Lawn, New York, and he was barely 13 when he was playing for the U14 New Jersey Colonials. The Colonials are a development program, youth hockey, highly skilled, highly competitive players, and the fact that he was playing up, I think, is obviously a very good sign. You see a lot of players kind of fall off at that age, whether it's kind of like, okay, like there's really, it's not fun anymore, I'm not good enough to do this, like to go to prep school or to pursue it further, or they just switch to a different sport, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Coronato stuck with it, and he ended up going to prep school in Connecticut and left his family. To me, that is crazy. And I know we see it all the time with these Canadian kids or kids who go to the OHL that have billet families and things like that. And it's just like, I cannot imagine being 15 years old and like moving entirely away from my family. And granted, it's a little different being in like a prep school setting, but he has worked very hard, and he doesn't take any of it for granted. So after prep school, he went to the USHL, where he earned the nickname Bison for how he just plowed through opponents in the offensive zone. He had 48 goals and 85 points in his draft year. He actually led the league in goals, which is pretty neat. I think it's always neat when you see kids come up through the USHL or that have strong ties to, like the National Development Program for any country. But I think as a homegrown player, Coronato is just like hard worker through and through. And then after the USHL, he ended up going to Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He played unreal hockey in college. And the fact that he was on the Flames radar and their first round pick in 2022 is fantastic. We talk a lot about picking in that mushy middle, like after the top 10, kind of like 12 to 18, 19, really the rest of the first round. But Coronato was a steal and has been a steal. So he was a second team all ECAC hockey and first team all Ivy selection in 2022-23. He had 20 goals and 16 assists in 34 games, and he played with a team best 5 game-winning goals on the year. So the Flames knew what they were getting. They knew that they were getting someone with a lot of skill and that could shoot the puck and, most importantly, score. Looking at an 18-year-old and getting that is impressive. And to be able to have him continue through college a little bit and then sign his ELC, I would say benefited him. I don't think that he was a player that needed to make the immediate jump. And quite frankly, I think it's silly to do that because he can't play in the AHL until he's 20 years old, and that rule is soon changing. But it's just like you might as well get consistent top line minutes still in a competitive role. But like I'd mentioned, drafted 13th overall by the Flames in 2022. He has worked very hard to get where he is and to hopefully sustain this. I really like his background because it is not one you see every day with this Flames roster. In a way, it's similar to Johnny Gaudreau's. And I'm not saying that he's, but there's a similar path there. It's going through, Hockey East. It's going through the USHL. It's going through local youth hockey programs in the New Jersey area and being someone that is so heavily rooted with their family ties. And we're going to talk a little bit more about his family in a little bit and how they played a big role in him signing this extension this offseason. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Coronato's Flames tenure and what we hope to see from him down the road. Coming up next on Locked On Flames. Ever wish managing your money felt a little easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building wealth. I knew that I was spending far too much money on takeout at work throughout the week, and I used Monarch Money to really put that into perspective for me because, boy, it adds up after a while. And where you can cut back, you can also reward yourself. So maybe instead of ordering out 3 times a week, you save it for Fridays, or you start off the week with a nice hot sub from the local sub joint. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube, as we carry you through the off season and one day closer to the season opener. So Matt Coronato finished his season with Harvard and made his NHL debut on March 26, 2023. This was such a fun time because you had Dustin Wolf, who was also set to make his NHL debut, and then there's a very specific intermission interview that Coronato did with, I believe it was Ryan Leslie at the desk, and he is in a button-down shirt that is far too small. You can tell that like he threw whatever was in his suitcase, like in his dorm, in a suitcase, and got on the plane to Calgary. But to watch like any of these players go from these freshly drafted kids to up through whatever development system they choose, and then to their NHL debut, and then of course years down the road, it is so, like, I don't know if refreshing, like, it's great to see their hard work pay off. Naturally, his first goal was a power play goal. I feel like that sums up his game pretty well. I think my hot take for this season is that Coronato will have the most power play goals. He'll lead the team in power play goals. One thing that he did desperately need to improve on was, of course, his skating, and he has done just that. And that was pretty evident going from his brutal 2023-24 rookie season. Minimal offense, never could really get his footing, to this year. 24 goals and 47 points in 77 games. Like, that's just, he really blossomed. And I think that it's something worth noting that everyone's path to the NHL is different, as well as their adjustment period. Like, there are some players that just come in and they make themselves right at home. And I think Connor Zary is a good player, or a good example of that. I think, you can get hot at the gate and then fizzle out, and then, kind of struggle to get back on your feet and find consistency. I think there are a few Flames who have experienced that. And it's all part of a learning process, because not only are you playing hockey at a higher skilled level with highly skilled players, you're adjusting to a whole new lifestyle. And it's not necessarily, it can't all come together at once sometimes. But I think that it's important to just remember, you may want this guy. No, I'm not saying Matt Coronato. This is just a player, like a hypothetical player. You may want this guy to be in the NHL playing, 20 minutes a night. And that sounds really good. But if that's not where he fits on this roster, maybe it is more beneficial for him to play in the AHL or back with his junior team, depending on his age and whatnot. But it's okay for players to get off to a slow start, and it's not about being the best right out of the gate. Can you sustain that? Can you sustain the longevity, the consistency, the discipline that it takes to get there? And I think truthfully, I thought that after this, I thought we were going to get another bridge deal for Coronato since he was an RFA. And I thought that we would see him end up going home, back to the States. But he decided on the road trip in the spring when the Flames were swinging through New York, I think Philly too, that he wanted to be in Calgary long term, which is refreshing because there has been the stigma of, oh, Americans don't want to play in Calgary. And then you go sign this young kid to this deal. And for him to, he went into detail about it and how he was having homemade meals and home cooked meals by his mom, and getting together with his family. And you would think that that would send someone like, oh my God, I need to be close to home. I miss this, how can I do, how can I make this possible? No. They had conversations about what life in Calgary looked like, what his goals were, and he decided on that trip, okay, let's get something done. And that's amazing. A 7-year, $6.5 million a year contract extension is great. I think he is worth every penny. And I know it's only been 1 year and it's a risk throwing that term and money at a player. But I think that Coronato shows you something special. And he isn't at his peak yet. There is still room for him to grow and get even better. And that's what makes this a worthwhile investment. I think to have a player that has been away from home since he was 15, 16 years old, to come home, be around his family all the time, or for a few days in a row, probably more than he had since probably the Christmas break, and still say, okay, my future, Calgary is my future. I think that is huge. And it shows that he believes in and is buying into what Craig Conroy and co are selling. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next for him. And coming up next, we're going to dive into what may be down the road for Matty Coronato and kind of what my predictions or expectations are as we enter the 2025-2026 season. Thanks everyone for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at @Belmosto. So I think with any contract extension comes a wave of concern. And, maybe for people who are, I feel like saying casual, saying someone's a casual fan sounds derogatory, but I don't mean it like that. If you aren't in the thick of content creation, covering this team in some capacity, or, living and breathing and dying by the Flames, you might just look at Matt Coronato and say, okay, cool, 25 goal scorer. You love to see it. Or you can look at this and say, oh, remember when the Flames got one good season out of Andrew Mangiapane and signed him and gave him $6 million? Look how that turned out. Or you even look at the Sharon Govich contract. 5 years at $5 million. Hasn't even kicked in yet, and he didn't have a great, healthy season last year. With Coronato, I wouldn't be shocked if you did see a bit of regression. Why? Because it's only natural. I think that a lot of these young players, it is the sophomore slump, but I mean, granted, he's played over 100 NHL games at this point, but wow, that's bananas. to think about. But for him to go from college, the AHL, and bouncing back and forth in between the Wranglers and the Flames, to starting the season with the Flames, getting sent back down, not really being happy with that, and then immediately seeing success once he's called back up and earning a spot on the team, that is hard work, and that is the consistency and discipline that I talked about earlier. I really think that the light bulb moment was his overtime winner in Montreal. It was the game Anthony Mantha tore his ACL, and like I said, scored a big overtime winner. And I think that kind of was the confidence he needed. Not Mantha getting hurt, but just, a roster spot became available, and well, there you have it, kind of situation. And he has worked very hard. He if you saw pictures of him, I know I posted them, and they've been kind of circulating around, from Uyghur's wedding, he looks like he has put on muscle, which tells me he is doing a lot of off-season training. And that's what you want to see. You don't want to see someone who will slack off or deviate from their goals and the vision in its entirety. And I think it's important because we have seen how many players, I think of Sam Honzik, who has very little meat on his bones, just get crushed and injured. And maybe some muscle would do some protecting. And Matty isn't afraid to, get down and play in the dirty areas. And obviously he's not much of a fighter, but I think, it's still a physical game regardless. And I think this season you're going to see that slight regression, but you're probably also going to see him take big steps forward. It is a long season, and so much can happen between October and April. And one of my big wishes, I guess is the right word, would be for the Flames to use him and have him take on a little bit more responsibility. I think that that's reasonable. I think we'll see him. We need to see him on the power play a lot more. I think that he really just, for a team that hates shooting the puck, Coronato kind of is your only hope, especially in a special team situation like that. So I think having him on the ice would do wonders. It might help you a little bit. But I also think that he can kind of serve as a mentor for this next group of young guys, which is crazy to say because I feel like they just drafted him. But obviously, last season, his roommate and best friend gets traded mid-game. The same game he scores a hat trick, and then they take it away. They credit the third goal to Blake Coleman. And if you were online that night, and saw the picture that the Flames admin posted of Coronato, he looked so sad and so defeated. Obviously, this was before the goal was recredited. But it made me laugh. After long after the fact, because it was just such a defeating night. The Flames trade away one of their biggest vibe guys and the biggest vibes guys, and it just, you see a lot of people in the locker room kind of feel the effects of that. So I think that Coronato takes pride in the sacrifices his teammates make, that his family has made. He's disciplined. He is willing to put in that extra hard work to make himself a better hockey player and to be a good locker room guy. And at the end of the day, that's really it's what you want. So I have a good feeling about Matt Coronato's season. I think my biggest prediction is, of course, he's going to lead the team in power play goals. I think him and Zary will probably be very, very close in that aspect, and we can come back at the end of the season. I think that when the time comes, Matt Coronato is going to be a stud in the playoffs, and I am looking forward to that. And that'll do it for me here on today's episode of Locked on Flames. Thank you all so much for joining me. Tomorrow, I will have a deep dive on Craig Conroy as a player and as a general manager, and getting to know Connie a little bit more. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. You can hang out with us through the off season as well as once the season kicks back off 5 days a week. And I will see you all later. Bye-bye.